Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here today. I'm Mary Kirchner, and I lead customer success at Focal CXM. I'm genuinely excited that you're joining us because in life sciences, data reliability is not just a back office issue. It shows up in every interaction, every insight, and every decision that builds or breaks trust. A little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A below. Next slide, please. Today, we're going to explore how reliable connected data across systems like Salesforce and Veeva strengthens customer trust, improves the quality of insights, and enables more consistent, compliant experience for HCPs, patients, and partners. We will align on commercial processes, delve into sample use cases, and then see a live demo of how this all works. Next slide. Today, we're joined by Adithya Buddhavarapu, co-founder and CEO of Focal CXM. Adi has spent his career at the intersection of life sciences and CRM, and he's very passionate about re-engineering customer and employee journeys through great data and AI. We are also joined by Anand Rao. He's a GTM and demand generation leader at Datagaps. He has deep expertise in data management and analytics. Anand works with teams to bring data testing and observability into the real world so leaders can trust what they're seeing and move faster with confidence. Thank you for joining us today. Adi and Anand, I will pass this over to you.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you, Anand, for joining. Super excited about it. Again, this is Adithya Buddhavarapu. I lead Focal CXM and very passionate about the life sciences space. Very quick intro about Focal. I don't want to spend too much of time here. We are passionate about the industry and work very closely with medical and commercial teams globally to make sure that we are able to improve the processes specific to them. Next slide. I just want to focus on key processes within the life sciences from a commercial perspective. What we are talking about today is in the context of the commercial model. However, it is not limited to commercial. We have data challenges in the preclinical space leading into the clinical space, and then from a commercialization perspective as well. So at a high level, this lists a few of the key aspects from a commercial process standpoint. And what we would like to highlight today is across the many projects that we delivered, whether it is in rebates, whether it is in patient engagement, HCP engagement, data is something that is sort of the long pole. It does not have as much of the sizzle. We are all talking about AI. We are all talking about agentic AI, generative AI, all sorts of things. But then still, the fundamentals are really about having a very strong data foundation. And when I say data foundation, from my experience in delivering various projects, it's the user experience, the UI, the application layer, everything is great. But when it comes to, let's say, in an application migration project, it's always about the data. And unfortunately, not enough importance is given to the data quality, to data validation in a very consistent way within organizations. So we come towards the end of the project, the UI looks great, everybody's happy, and then, oh, we are not able to see our data in the new system. And these are the kinds of things that take away the confidence, that take away the trust from a business user perspective. So across all these, if you look at 21 CFR Part 11, if you look at any of the compliance aspects from a GDPR, content commercialization, or it could be samples management. So data, how do we ensure that data is moving as expected throughout the value stream? And do end users have trustworthy data, trustworthy BI, trustworthy AI? This is what it'll all be about as we move forward. So the next few slides, I just want to take a few examples from market access. Rebates play a very important role on the human health and animal health as an example. Similarly, we have challenges in terms of CRM migrations, which I'll talk about. So I'll highlight a few areas and then where we think the problems exist today, and also with the demo, kind of give a very brief overview of how we intend to solve the problems. Okay, next slide. Let's take an example of a rebates process. In this particular example, I'm talking about animal health, but the same thing is applicable even in the human health as well, where from a market access perspective, you have rebates being distributed, and then do the hospital systems, the HCOs, are they getting rebates in a timely way? Are they getting the right amounts? And these are the challenges. So if I kind of double click on this process here, so let's say that you're an animal health manufacturer comes up with certain drugs, and then typically in the animal health space, the distributor takes the products, kind of distributes them to the end customers who are like veterinary clinics, etc. And then the sales data comes back from the distributor to the manufacturer. Right? So the sales data usually what happens is on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, depending upon the type of engagement, the sales data goes back from the distributors across all these channels, and then they collect it, and then it goes to the manufacturer. Now the manufacturer is responsible for calculating these rebates. So are the rules properly applied? Is the sales data intact? Because most often from our experience, what we notice is that there could be issues with respect to the sales data that is coming in, because the rebates processing is by itself fairly complex. And when we add data challenges on top of the processing, then there are always some issue or the other with rebates, which take away the trust for the business users within the pharmaceutical or the animal health company, or it'll take away the trust from the end user perspective. The end user assumes or expects a certain amount of rebate because the end user or the veterinary clinic purchased a certain volume of drugs. However, the rebates may not match up to what their expectations are, and that results in lost trust and lost loyalty. So how do we ensure that when the distributor sends this data sets on a periodic basis, even today in many organizations it happens in Excel, it happens through some portals, but how do we kind of check the data that's coming in, that's being ingested at various points? So by the time the rebates are calculated, how do we ensure that the right rules are applied and the right results are responded? We'll show you an example, but this is one area that we have struggled with and want to highlight and show you a working example. Next slide. Use case number 2 is about the Veeva and Salesforce story. All of us in the commercial space are aware that we need to take decisions. Customers who have been on the Veeva platform as a starting point need to take decisions whether to go with the Vault CRM or to go with the Salesforce, so Life Sciences Cloud. And there are many organizations taking those decisions right now, right? It's happening. And few already have taken the decisions. So while these migrations happen, majority of the work, probably the platforms will take care of it, and the end users will not have any impact. However, I do strongly believe that there are many internal systems. The journey doesn't end once the migration is over. One, we need to make sure that the migration is properly done from the Veeva to the Vault CRM Salesforce. But even after that is done, how do we ensure that the data that goes into the further downstream systems, like whether it is any lakehouse or an existing data warehouse or any other integration points, downstream consumptions, consumer-facing apps, HCP-facing apps. So how do we ensure that the data is going through across the board? This is another challenge that we foresee, and we believe that organizations need a better way of handling or planning to ensure that they don't stumble into any kind of compliance issues as they think through these migration areas that come up which are already happening, or when they plan to migrate over the next few years. Next slide. The other area is also related to that. Let's say that customers are on whatever CRM platform that they go with today or even in the future, and there could be multiple other systems from where the data has to come into a lakehouse and where reporting is done. So the most common tools from our experience in the recent past, last 5 years or so, folks are shifting to Power BI because Microsoft does a pretty awesome job of from a pricing standpoint, or Tableau is another popular tool or platform. So customers are going either they have Power BI or Tableau. But then what happens in reality is when senior leadership or customers or whoever the end stakeholders are, when they're looking at these dashboards and reports, they might look extremely fancy, beautiful pie charts, beautiful histograms. However, how do we ensure that those reports and dashboards are trustworthy? How do we ensure that the end user is able to trust the data? If I'm looking at territory sales data, how do I know that I can trust the sales data? How do we ensure that the reports data is actually being compared to any of the source systems or the data in the lakehouse to build that trust and close the gap to ensure that we are doing the right things is another challenge that we often stumble upon. And unfortunately, even today in many large organizations, the testing for business intelligence is done manually or semi-manually or in a very ad hoc way. There could be certain teams using Python. There could be certain teams using their own frameworks or Excel plugins, things like that. So the challenge is, how do we ensure that we are coming up with a consistent way at an enterprise level to ensure that we are taking care of the data from the point of ingestion all the way into reporting to ensure that everything is taken care of. Anand will be talking a little bit more about that in the next few minutes. But these are the three problem statements that we'll discuss a little bit in more detail through a live demo. Today, time is very limited, but we wanted to give you a flavor of what that would look like. So the next slide. Looking at these problem statements, like I said earlier, our goal collectively from Focal's perspective, where we bring in the industry knowledge from a life sciences standpoint in the commercial space, and from Datagaps standpoint, from Datagaps as a solution, and what we intend, the value that we want to bring in to our customers and prospects is a different way, a more unified way of looking at the enterprise data challenges. And when I say data quality, it's not just data quality, but it's data quality, data reconciliation, data validation across all these systems, reporting, compliance. So there are so many facets, governance, there are so many facets to this. So with that, I would request Anand to take over and talk about the DataOps platform so that you get a better handle, and then we can drill into the actual demo where we'll walk you through a solution. With that, Anand.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Adi. Is everyone able to see me? Everything good? Okay. So now let's talk about Datagaps. And it's great to be here partnering with Focal CXM. So at Datagaps, we focus on observing and validating the full data journey, as Adi briefly touched on, from ingestion to consumption in your analytics platform. So our mission is to empower enterprises with trustworthy data, analytics, and AI. So we deliver this through the DataOps suite. This suite is an end-to-end web-based platform that can be licensed as individual modules that you see there, or as a bundle. So the core products are for this suite are for use cases that Adi just mentioned, and they include validation for ETL, for business intelligence, testing the data quality, as well as we also have a synthetic data generator. So which together automate this pipeline testing, the report to data reconciliation, as well as continuous data quality monitoring and synthetic data generation. So you can deploy this suite on-premise or in your cloud environment. It's when you're doing it on-premise, it's fully contained behind your firewalls. We don't retain any of your data. It's built on the Apache Spark platform. It's an open source platform, and it allows you to scale to billions of rows so you can validate at production volumes without any kind of sampling. And then a little bit of elevation here. So Datagaps is recognized by Gartner as a specialist in the data pipeline test automation category. And we have proven our credibility over and over again by having tested the top 2 Tableau installations in the country. So we are SOC 2 compliant, and we have been in business 10 plus years. Next slide. So this is a view of the end-to-end validation that we do to give you confidence in your data. So we watch the pipeline from the moment the files are ingested or the APIs or the CRM records land all the way through the lake or the warehouse and all the way to the dashboards that people rely on. So Adi mentioned a few different processes. The rebate process, for example. So as sales and other kind of usage files arrive, we score the quality, auto-bill the tests for eligibility and number of units, and reconcile the sources with the targets before any money is calculated. And so that stops any kind of overpayment or underpayment and produces an audit-ready report. The second use case was the split between Veeva and Salesforce. So when customer data flows into the Vault CRM or Salesforce, we continuously compare the structures and the records, catch changes early, and validate the loads into the lakehouse and all the other integrations you have in place. So this change doesn't break operations or other metrics. The third case is around commercial analytics. So we validate the curated data marts as well as the business intelligence layer, checking the visuals, the filters, the numbers in Power BI and Tableau, and load testing for any kind of busy periods that you may have. And across all these three different platforms and from end to end, we use generative AI and agentic AI to speed the work. You can draft the tests that you want in plain English, and it explains the failures and summarizes the report differences. So everything is running on schedule in parallel with clear pass-fail results. And so the result is you have faster projects, fewer surprises, and decisions you can trust. Next slide. So the first module, if you will, of the suite is the ETL validator. And it has a number of different capabilities that I've highlighted here on the right. The data comparison, for example, reconciles rows and columns between the sources and the targets. So in rebates, for example, it matches the distributor sales and the usage back to the manufacturer records before the payouts happen. In the Veeva Salesforce split, it confirms whether the Vault and the Salesforce loads land the same way in the lakehouse. For any kind of commercial analytics use cases, it verifies the curated data marts, feed the business intelligence layer with the numbers the leaders expect. And then we have metadata comparison, which catches any kind of schema drift early. So if a Veeva or a Salesforce object changes or a rebate file layout changes, you see that impact instantly and can promote based on that to production. And then we have a number of plugins as well as the capability to work with SQL or Python or Scala to validate any kind of complex business logic and reuse it. So any kind of rebate tiers, unit conversions, or any kind of deduplicating you have of CRM. So all that can be done. And then you have data profiling, which highlights any kind of outliers, missing values, pattern changes. And this is a great capability to have as you think about the rebate anomalies, any kind of KPI skews, etc. And then we have the pipelines and conditional processing, which automate the end-to-end run, promote across environments, and alert you on failures. So the result is you have the trust built into the rebate payments process, a risk-free CRM split, and reliable analytics, which is delivered faster with repeatable audit-ready validation. Next slide. So the second module I want to touch on is the BI validator. So it protects the last mile of analytics, the screen's leaders' trust. It has 6 different checks on the dashboards to stay accurate through all this change. The first is the source validation, which confirms each report points to the right data set and has the latest refresh. And Rebates can show the current claims, the payouts, the post-split CRM metrics, read through the correct Vault or Salesforce objects, and all the commercial KPIs reflect the current data marts. And then there's functional validation, which enforces the business rules, the filters, the parameters, the calculations. So all these rebate tiers and eligibility stay intact. New CRM dimensions behave as they're supposed to, and the KPI roll-ups don't drift after the release. And then there's report to database validation, which ties every value back to the approved SQL, guaranteeing the visual matches of the warehouse. And then you got performance validation and security validation, ensuring all these month-end rebates and QBRs have the right SLAs. And then any kind of row level and role access protects the data from inaccurate access. Next slide. So the last module I wanted to touch on among the 4 modules is the data quality monitor. And this gives you an end-to-end view of the data health with all those capabilities that are listed there, from data ingestion to the lake or the warehouse and into the business intelligence. So we have a single data quality score that rolls up, all the hundreds to thousands of checks that you have. So teams can treat the data health like a KPI and know when the pipeline is safe to use. So, for example, in the rebate scenario, you can use the rule wizard and it captures all the eligibility, the units, and time windows in plain language. And you can use profiling and anomaly detection to catch any kind of duplicate claims, missing NDC or unusual volume spikes before the payouts. And reconciliation allows you to prove the clinic files match the distributor totals and its audit-ready evidence. And for the Veeva and Salesforce split, as Vault CRM and Salesforce feed the lakehouse, the rules deployment and observability detect any kind of schema drift, any kind of referential integrity breaks, and any kind of stale refreshes. And the quality score becomes a green light or a red light for promoting new objects or new integrations. And for commercial analytics, the data quality monitor protects those curated data marts and business intelligence models, so you're able to continuously validate the dimensions, measures, and freshness for your Tableau or Power BI reports. So everything can be run on a schedule and scale across multiple pipelines and produce clear pass-fail outcomes. Next slide. So this is a lot here, but wanted to highlight that Datagaps uses AI to cut all the manual work and speed the outcomes across your data lifecycle. So we auto-generate the test cases from the mapping documents and can reverse engineer any kind of ETL code into structured checks. And AI SQL Assistant turns all your plain language into executable queries and assertions. And for quality, AI drafts clear column and table descriptions, recommends those rules, profiles that data, and detects anomalies. And you can then watch the key metrics in real time. On the BI side, all these AI capabilities compare the dashboards across platforms. So if you're using Power BI and Tableau, it can compare across platforms to catch all those broken visuals, the filters, or other KPIs. So it also detects and masks the PII and create any kind of realistic synthetic data for safe testing. So the result is you're getting a faster delivery, you have stronger controls in place for those trusted decisions. So in order to see how we do this, next slide. So we have a live demo, and I'd like to bring on Subhanshu Dixit, who's also from Datagaps, to showcase how we do this across our product. Subhanshu, over to you.
So while, thanks Anand, that was helpful. And while Subhanshu is picking it up, requested him to share the screen so that we can take a perspective of what that looks like from a product perspective. Again, going back, reminding those three scenarios, right? We want to show simple examples of what the first one, going back into the rebates, what could that look like potentially? And then number two, from a Salesforce perspective, number three, from a BI standpoint. So in this example, if like what Subhanshu is sharing is the DataOps Suite product, which again, we want to focus only on just the simple use case today. Like Anand explained, there are plenty of capabilities for data validation, reconciliation, etc. But the first that use case that we want to talk about is just imagine from a process perspective, we have the sales data coming in, like I mentioned, from the distributors to the manufacturers. So at that point itself, we can do a certain level of testing to make sure that the data is ingested properly. And then when it goes into further the downstream process where actually the rebates are calculated, ultimately we'll end up with some rebate data that might potentially look like this, right? So what was the rebate element calculated per line, per sale, and does it make sense? Are the rules applied properly? Do we have the right numbers? Is there a variation in terms of the rebates data that has been calculated? These are the questions that come up. So like Anand mentioned earlier, what we can do as part of this is you can model pretty much the entire flow, the entire process from a rebate process perspective. And then on top of that, you can define rules at each level. And as here, what Subhanshu is showing is a simple example of the rebates. Let's assume that the rebates are calculated already. And then what rules are applied on the calculated rebates data to make sure that there's not too much of variation. For example, let's say that a customer is getting periodically every quarter maybe $100,000 USD rebate, and suddenly there's a number that shows up as a 2 million. There could be some problem. And instead of eyeballing and instead of a business or a data analyst going through the data set, how do we automate that process? So Subhanshu, if you can just walk through this data set real quick and then give the example, that'll be great.
Yeah. So I'm not taking too many lines over here. What we basically have is the rebate data set, and we are passing it through a data quality node right here. And as you can see, we have a good set of rules which are present right here. Many of these rules can be configured using zero code systems, which can be expandable as well, so that we are staying centric to the zero code use case and functionality that we want to give up. And while we are doing that, we want to make sure that everything is reusable, both across different projects, different domains, different environments, and other aspects as well. One other thing, awesome. When the application does call out something specific like an incorrect record, we are not just separating the records out into separate data sets. We also have the capabilities of keeping track of these data sets. What that means is that if these 55 records, which have been deemed bad currently, are fixed or say claimed to be fixed by a developer, you can just rerun the same check and the application is automatically going to trace and track the same bad records, kind of issue tracking for your DQ systems on top of systems.
Yeah. Thank you, Subhanshu. So that's a simple example. Again, we can define the rules. We can define the flows here. If you go back to the image of the day where we have the data flow. So here, if you look at it, it looks very simple. If you go back to that image, this looks very simple, but in reality, this can be made very complex depending upon how the data flow is. So to start with, again, you can model the whole thing on how the data is flowing, and this can be your testing framework in production to make sure that as the data comes in from the distributor to the manufacturer, how do we ensure that all the rules are run, call out if there's any discrepancy upfront so that the distributor can take care of it. There could be some notifications going back to the distributor so that they can fix the data sets, maybe adding a missing column, or there could be some issues with the units. Things like that could happen. And the data then flows through, and then we can ensure that the data is flowing from the point of ingestion into where the calculations are done. Once the calculations are done, how do we test the data with a certain set of rules before the data goes into SAP or any other system where the actual money is cut, the check is cut and sent out to the customer. So we took a very simple example here to show that rules can be defined and how they could be run on a periodic basis so that the reporting could be useful for multiple use cases, but this can be replicated, and there are a few scenarios where the whole white space is filled out with various components because the processes could be pretty complex. Okay. With that, if you can go to the next scenario where from a Veeva, again, a very simple example here that we want to talk about, from a Veeva to a Salesforce. Let's say a customer or you decide that you want to go from the existing Veeva platform to the Vault CRM or to a Salesforce. What we have is on the far left, you have the Veeva CRM connector. So basically you can connect through APIs, you can bring in the data from any system really. And then you have the Salesforce platform where we have a direct connector today that we can connect to Salesforce, bring in the data set. And then this is the Salesforce data, like an order data that you write the query and then we are able to see this. And then the third one is really about the component that compares the data sets, right? If you go back to the flow, the data flow, Shubhanshu. So there are three things here. One is the data coming in from Veeva, as an example, order data, sales data. The other one is coming in from a Salesforce environment. And then the third component that you see is basically a comparison component to ensure that the comparison happens successfully and there are no discrepancies with respect to the data sets. And once this is run, if you can show up the results, Shubhanshu. So once this is run, the data can look like this in terms of all the green. You don't have to worry about it, but where you see the deltas in terms of the records between these data sets, there could be a migration issue, it could be an operational issue, it could be only a certain set of transactions. But then it's important for us to be able to understand that, okay, these are the 4 or 5 problem records, and that way we can double click and understand what is the difference. Is there a mismatch of the metadata, or is there a difference in terms of the actual numbers, like how they're displayed here? So the comparison or the validation across these multiple systems. And again, this is a very simple example, but imagine data coming in either as part of the migration or post-migration. You're basically moving the data further downstream. And how do we ensure from an industry standpoint, again, like I said earlier, that the end users are actually getting the data that they expect and in a trustworthy way? Okay. Thank you, Shubhanshu. And the third example that we would like to highlight here is really about the Power BI testing automation. Right. So like I said earlier, it's unfortunate that many organizations still think that the testing for Power BI is done manually. So there are people who are checking the reports on a regular basis, but that can be automated. So what Shubhanshu is showing here is we connected to a Power BI instance within the framework of the tool, and then the framework brings in the Power BI, the reports or dashboards, that the views that are displayed here. And then what we can do, if you go to the flow, Shubhanshu, so here, very similar to the flow that we showed earlier, we are basically bringing in a data set and we are bringing in the data from a Power BI report. And just to call it out again, the data coming in from a Power BI report. So in the back end, we connect to it, the Power BI report, bring in the data that is specific to a report, and be able to compare the data sets between this Power BI report and the actual data, right? So these are the things which are very helpful. So if you go back to the comparison, Shubhanshu, so if you go back to the comparison and run that, so here, very similar to the data example that we showed you earlier, here the difference is basically with the comparison is between the reports data and a backend data set, right? So it could be your lakehouse, it could be your source system, but how do we compare these data sets, especially when there are any changes, upgrades to a particular lakehouse, or if you're moving your lakehouse, or there is a change in the ETL layer, you want to ensure that your reports are not impacted. So what we propose here is an automated way of solving these problems, and that way we can do more with less, which is a big problem. And you're creating a data ready or a data infrastructure that is ready for your AI projects. Right. Thank you, Shubhanshu. So these are 3 examples that we wanted to showcase today. Again, happy to demonstrate and get into further detail later on that we'll talk about towards the end. But with that, if you can, Bhavesh, if you can share your screen. Yeah. And where is all this heading, right? We are seeing patterns in terms of data, in terms of AI coming in from various standpoints. We are working on data, solving some hardcore data challenges from a testing validation standpoint. But the way we collectively see the future is there is going to be a lot of agentic AI driven observability, and it's already happening in some situations, but we want to see more vertical observability, whether it is specific to Vault, specific to a particular commercial process, specific to rebates, like a rebates observability, so that end users, business teams, commercial IT teams can be confident about the data, and we are able to leverage the agentic AI in a way that fits the bill for everyone. This is one of the most exciting moments for all of us to be in. We probably will not see a time like this ever again, given the nature of the pace at which the agentic AI is moving. But how do we make it vertical? How do we make it business process centric? Is what the challenge would be, and that's what we are collectively driving towards. Mary?
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Adi and Anand, for all of your expertise today. We do have a few questions, so I'll pull those up here. The first one is, if a team rolls out data gaps, what changes first for the business users?
Yeah, thank you, Mary. So that's interesting question as we think about how quickly we see value from the data gaps environment. So most customers start protecting a single scenario, like for example the rebates payout, or the Veeva Salesforce cutover, or a KPI or a bunch of KPIs, and see that tangible value in a certain number of weeks. And the early wins should be simple but powerful. And you catch the mismatches between the source and the warehouse. You block the low quality files before they cascade down the pipeline. And you lock down the dashboards executives use. So that would be the first lane that stabilizes. And then you extend the coverage and you rinse and repeat, add more tables, more rules, more reports, so that you have a predictable cadence. And the result is a compounding benefit. Fewer late surprises, shorter cycles, and you have steadily rising trust without waiting for a multi-year or multi-quarter program.
Okay, great. The next question, I think you answered part of this. Where do you typically see value first, but how fast can teams expect to feel it? See the value?
Right. Yeah, so I think I answered that as well. It could be like a few weeks, and also it could be like a couple of quarters. But the way you do it is you cascade this effect, and you roll it out across multiple tables, multiple rules, multiple reports, and you have a predictable cadence, so that you're doing this in an orderly fashion. Okay,
great. Another question here. How do you recommend splitting ownership between the business and IT once it's live?
Yeah, and always the case. So we make all this ownership pretty obvious and collaborative. So the business stewards define the intent, the rules for the rebates and the KPIs, as well as any kind of tolerance band, minimums, maximums. and approve those thresholds that reflect the real world risk that they see. And then once that's defined, IT operationalizes these checks. They run automatically, scale with the data volume, and fail safely. So analytics teams own that last mile, confirming that all those filters, those calculations and visuals reflect the business definition, and everyone is reading the same scorecard, so that there's no ambiguity about any kind of accountability or status. So,
And just to add into that, and another thing on that question is about how do we make it easier for business to consume information? Because platforms, tools are great, but how can we automate this, make it easier? So that's where the configuration, and there could be opportunities to present information to business in a more streamlined way, in a more periodic way. That way they're only looking at the reports and not getting into the details of building pipelines and all that. So collectively trying to make it easier as well.
Right. So the end result is that leaders are trusting these numbers, and there's less manual reconciliation that's happening, and you're spending time explaining the insights.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question is, what should we measure to prove that it's working and worth the investment?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of measurement, right, you got the business side and the IT side. And let me start with the IT side, since Datagaps comes from a horizontal platform background. So first is you'll have fewer production surprises, and no late night data issues showing up in the morning meetings. And then once those issues are identified, you have a faster resolution process. So if something slips, how quickly do we detect it and restore the trust that we have in the dashboards? And then there's this whole quality over different domains, the rebates, the CRM data, the commercial data, getting more objective every time, healthier, if you will, every month. And then there's this whole dashboard reliability. Are the payout cycles accurate? The launches, any kind of quarter closing. So you see improvements in on-time delivery of all these dashboards and data, and reduced rework, and basically cleaner audits. So that's how you demonstrate.
Okay, great. Thank you. The next one is, I think this is for Adi. Do you have an out-of-the-box connector for Veeva Vault?
Yeah, so there is no out-of-the-box connector today, but then we have experience in building out the connectors, and it's not too much of effort. We can very easily connect. There is a way to connect to a generic JDBC driver, so we can bring in, make it easy. So that's not too much of effort.
Okay, and then the final question, is this mainly for commercial teams, or do you see it used across other functions too?
So, like I mentioned earlier, I think the focus today was more on the commercial front, just to keep it to a minimal set of use cases. However, this can easily be extended, and there is absolutely a need all the way from preclinical to clinical, because if you look at the metrics today, a lot of money is wasted, a lot of trust is lost across the, from a preclinical all the way through. So this is not specific to commercial. It can be extended to any business process within the value chain.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all for your time today, and a special thank you to Adi and Anand for sharing your insights and this truly amazing solution that you have available. So for those of you who have joined, you will receive a link shortly to this webinar, and if you have any questions, please reach out to us. And we look forward to communicating with you soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.